There's something haunting about a language lost to time, a voice silenced for centuries, waiting to be heard again. Picture this, a civilization so influential that it shaped the mighty Roman Empire, yet its words remain just out of reach, etched into stone and sarcophagi, whispering secrets we're still struggling to understand. This is the mystery of the Etruscans, a people whose language has baffled scholars for generations. Even the Romans, who borrowed so much from them, couldn't fully decipher it. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of archaeologists and linguists, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that could rewrite our understanding of the ancient world. What makes the Etruscan language so elusive? Imagine finding a book where half the pages are torn out, and the ones that remain are written in symbols you've never seen before. That's the challenge we face with their inscriptions scattered across tombs, pottery, and bronze tablets, each one a tantalizing clue. Some words resemble Latin, others are utterly unique, and without a Rosetta Stone to guide us, every translation is a leap of faith. Yet, these artifacts aren't just linguistic riddles. They're windows into a culture that defined art, religion, and politics long before Rome rose to power. The Etruscans weren't just neighbors to the Romans. They were their teachers, their rivals, and in many ways, their predecessors. So why does this ancient language matter now? Because languages aren't just collections of words, they're living records of how people thought, worshipped, and lived. Deciphering Etruscan could reveal lost stories of conquest, trade, and daily life, filling gaps in history we didn't even know existed. It's like assembling a mosaic where every tiny fragment changes the bigger picture. From the intricate carvings on a funeral urn to the cryptic symbols hidden in a buried temple, each discovery brings us closer to hearing the Etruscans speak again. And that's the journey we're starting today, one that takes us deep into the heart of an enigma where every stone has a story to tell. The Etruscans didn't just appear in history, they erupted onto the scene like a force of nature. Emerging around the 8th century before the Common Era in what's now central Italy, they built a civilization so advanced that even their rivals marveled at their craftsmanship. Picture cities with intricate drainage systems, artisans producing jewelry so fine it dazzled the ancient world, and priests who could supposedly divine the future by reading the flight patterns of birds. This was a society where women held unprecedented status, dining alongside men at lavish banquets, a custom that shocked their Greek contemporaries. Their territory, known as Etruria, became a hub of trade and innovation, with their influence stretching from the Alps to the shores of Campania. Yet their origins remain one of history's great debates. The ancient historian Herodotus claimed they migrated from Lydia in modern-day Turkey, while others argued they were indigenous to Italy. Modern DNA studies add another twist, revealing genetic links to both Anatolia and local populations. What's clear is that by the time Rome was just a cluster of huts on the Tiber, the Etruscans were already building monumental tombs and trading with Phoenicians and Greeks. Their artistry wasn't just decorative, it told stories. A single fresco from a tomb in Tarquinia might show dancers, musicians, and feasting, offering glimpses into a world where death wasn't an end but a celebration. But how does a civilization so vibrant simply fade away? The answer lies in the slow, relentless rise of Rome. At first, the Etruscans and Romans were allies, even trading kings in their early days. The last kings of Rome before the Republic, Etruscan. But as Rome grew hungrier for power, tensions flared. The decisive blow came in the 4th century before the Common Era, when Rome systematically conquered Etruria's city-states. Yet it wasn't just military defeat that erased them, it was assimilation. The Romans adopted Etruscan gods like Uni, who became Juno, and rituals like the Triumph, where victorious generals paraded through the streets. Even their alphabet, adapted from the Greeks, became the basis for Latin script. By the 1st century before the Common Era, Etruscan nobles were proudly Roman, their language relegated to temple rites and fading inscriptions. The real tragedy: we'll never know how much was lost. Imagine a library burning, but slowly, over centuries. The Romans preserved Etruscan art but dismissed their literature as irrelevant. Only a handful of texts survived, mostly religious manuals or grave markers. What secrets might their lost plays, histories, or poems have held? Their language didn't vanish overnight, it retreated, syllable by syllable, until the last fluent speaker died without anyone realizing they were the end of an era. That's why every scrap of writing we find today isn't just a linguistic curiosity. It's a voice screaming across 25 centuries, begging to be heard. The Etruscan alphabet holds a peculiar paradox. It's both familiar and utterly foreign. At first glance, the letters look almost like Greek because, well, they are. Around the 8th century before the Common Era, the Etruscans encountered Greek traders along Italy's coasts and adopted their writing system, tweaking it to fit their own tongue. Imagine taking someone else's pen but writing in a secret code only your friends could read. That's essentially what happened here. The shapes of the letters, alpha, beta, gamma, were Greek, but the sounds and words they represented were purely Etruscan. Here's where things get fascinating. Because we know the Greek alphabet, we can technically read Etruscan inscriptions aloud. The letters spell out words like my or thuva, but without a dictionary or bilingual texts, those words might as well be random syllables. It's like hearing a song in a language you don't speak. You can hum the melody, but the meaning stays just out of reach. Scholars have managed to decipher some basics, like numbers or names of gods, thanks to repetitive patterns in grave markers or temple dedications. For instance, the word Zilath pops up often, likely meaning a magistrate or leader, but entire sentences remain stubbornly opaque. What makes this alphabet such a tantalizing clue? Unlike hieroglyphs or cuneiform, which required their own Rosetta Stones to unlock, the Etruscan script is tantalizingly close to languages we know, yet it guards its secrets fiercely. Take the word eyes, which appears frequently in religious texts. It might mean God, or it could mean prayer, or something entirely different. Without context, every translation is a guess. Even the direction of writing adds to the confusion. Early Etruscan texts zigzagged right to left, then left to right, like a plow turning rows in a field. Later, they settled into the left-to-right flow we recognize today, but those shifting habits leave modern linguists scrambling. The real breakthrough would be finding a longer text, something narrative, like a poem or law code. But most surviving inscriptions are frustratingly brief. A name on a tomb, a label on a vase, a curse scratched onto lead. The longest Etruscan text we have. The Zagreb mummy wrappings, a linen book used to wrap an Egyptian mummy, filled with 12 columns of text, likely a religious calendar. Yet without parallel translations, it's like holding a map with no legend. Every symbol points somewhere, but we don't know where. So why does this matter? Because alphabets aren't just tools for writing, they're cultural fingerprints. The Etruscans didn't just copy the Greeks. They remixed the script, dropping letters they didn't need and adding twists of their own. Their F sounded like our W, their H like a guttural KH. These choices reveal how they heard the world, what sounds mattered to them. And when the Romans borrowed this adapted alphabet, they carried those choices forward, shaping the very letters you're reading now. The Etruscan script is more than a puzzle. It's a bridge between worlds, linking ancient Greece to modern Europe, with whispers of a language we're still learning to hear. For decades, the Etruscan language seemed like a locked door with no key in sight until a flash of gold changed everything. In 1964, archaeologists digging at the ancient port of Pirgy, once a bustling Etruscan harbor, unearthed something extraordinary: 3 thin sheets of gold, carefully inscribed with elegant lettering. 2 were written in Etruscan, the 3rd in Phoenician, a language well understood by scholars. Instantly, the significance was clear. This wasn't just another grave marker or votive offering. It was a bilingual text, a rare chance to cross-reference 2 languages side by side. Finally, here was the closest thing to a Rosetta Stone the Etruscan world had ever offered. The Pyrgi Tablets, as they came to be known, were no ordinary artifacts. Dated to around 500 before the Common Era, they recorded a dedication by an Etruscan king named the Fairy Velianas to the Phoenician goddess Astarte, whom the Etruscans equated with their own deity, Uni. The text celebrated the construction of a shrine, blending political authority with divine favor. For the first time, scholars could match Etruscan phrases to known Phoenician equivalents, cracking open small but crucial fragments of vocabulary and grammar. Words like sacred, gift, and king suddenly had clear translations, offering a foothold in the linguistic dark. Yet the tablets also revealed the limits of such discoveries. While they confirmed the names of gods and titles, much of the text remained stubbornly opaque. The Phoenician version wasn't a direct translation, it was a looser summary, leaving entire Etruscan sentences without clear parallels. Think of it like finding 2 recipes for the same dish, but one is detailed while the other skips half the steps. The tablets gave scholars a taste, but not the full meal. What makes these golden plaques so tantalizing isn't just what they say, it's what they represent. They're proof that the Etruscans weren't isolated. They traded, worshipped, and negotiated with cultures across the Mediterranean. The mention of Astarte hints at a world where gods and goods traveled together, where a Phoenician goddess could find a home in an Etruscan temple, and the king's dedication. It's a snapshot of power, showing how rulers tied their legitimacy to divine approval, a practice Rome would later perfect. But here's the bittersweet truth: the Pyrgi Tablets are a glimpse, not a solution. For every word deciphered, a dozen more resist interpretation. Without more bilingual texts, the Etruscan language remains a half-solved riddle. Yet these golden sheets are a beacon, a reminder that somewhere, buried in the earth or hidden in plain sight, there might be another key waiting to turn the lock. Until then, we're left with these shimmering fragments whispering across millennia, urging us to keep searching. If you want to hear the Etruscans whisper, step inside one of their tombs. Unlike the stone slabs and broken pottery found elsewhere, their sarcophagi are masterpieces of communication, polished limestone and terracotta canvases covered in elegantly carved words. Take the famed sarcophagus of the spouses from Servitory, where a reclining couple smiles for eternity, their names Larth Tetnes and Thunchful Tarnai etched beside them. These aren't just labels, they're invitations. The Etruscans didn't merely bury their dead. They sent them off with detailed itineraries for the afterlife, complete with family lineages, titles, and even instructions for the gods. What makes these tomb inscriptions so revealing? For starters, they're formulaic in the best possible way. Like finding a stack of old postcards all signed the same way, the repetition helps linguists spot patterns. Phrases like, "I am the son of," or "dedicated to the underworld gods," appear again and again, allowing scholars to reconstruct basic grammar rules. Names are particularly telling. Many Etruscan women kept their family names after marriage, a practice rare in the ancient world, hinting at their surprisingly egalitarian society. And then there are the curses. Some tombs warn against disturbing the deceased with threats like, "May he have no seed," or "May the gods reject his offerings," proving pettiness transcends time. But the real magic lies in how these texts bridge the sacred and the everyday. A sarcophagus might list the deceased's political office alongside a plea to the underworld ferryman, Charon, to grant passage. Others describe funeral banquets where mourners feasted for days, blurring the line between farewell party and religious rite. The Etruscans saw death not as an end but as a transition, one that required paperwork. Tomb inscriptions were their version of passport applications for the afterlife, stamped with the approval of deities like terms, their version of Hermes, who guided souls to the next world. Why go to such lengths? Because for the Etruscans, words had power. Writing a name in stone ensured the dead wouldn't be forgotten. Omitting it was a fate worse than death. Some tombs even include fake inscriptions, blank lines where names should be, as if the mere act of carving text held magical significance. This obsession with memorialization might explain why they adopted writing so eagerly from the Greeks. It wasn't just practical, it was sacred. Every letter was a tether between worlds, a way to keep the voices of the departed alive in the land of the living. The irony, these meticulous records meant to defy time now serve a different purpose. As linguists pore over words like zilach, a magistrate, or clan son, they're not just translating epitaphs, they're rebuilding a language from the ground up. Each sarcophagus is a time capsule, its inscriptions frozen in mid-sentence, waiting for us to supply the missing words. And with every new tomb uncovered, the Etruscan silent stones begin to speak a little louder. Sometimes the most important clues aren't carved in stone, they're woven into fabric. Tucked away in a Zagreb museum lies one of history's strangest linguistic puzzles, the Liber Linteus, a 1,200-word Etruscan manuscript written not on vellum or clay, but on strips of linen used to wrap an Egyptian mummy. Imagine unraveling bandages only to find paragraphs of a lost language staring back at you. This is the bizarre reality scholars faced when they discovered this text in the 19th century. How did an Etruscan religious document end up entombed with an Egyptian corpse? The story begins with a Roman-era collector who likely acquired both the mummy and the linen as curiosities, unaware they were packaging sacred words like ordinary packing material. What makes the Liber Linteus so extraordinary isn't just its improbable survival, it's the sheer volume of text. Most Etruscan inscriptions are brief, names, curses, or dedications. But here, row after row of neatly inked words stretch across the fabric, organized into 12 columns like chapters in a book. The content, almost certainly a ritual calendar, listing dates, deities, and ceremonies tied to the Etruscan lunar year. Phrases repeat like clockwork: on the third day, sacrifice to Catha, invoke the gods, hinting at a meticulous liturgical script. For comparison, it's as if someone found a complete Catholic missal from the Middle Ages, but in a language no one fully understands. Yet the text guards its secrets fiercely. Without parallel translations, scholars rely on educated guesses. The word Tinia, for example, appears frequently, likely referring to the sky god Tinia, their version of Zeus. Other terms like eyes and Essar might denote offerings or celestial events, but their precise meanings slip through our fingers. Even the structure offers puzzles. Why do certain passages resemble poetry with rhythmic repetitions, while others read like dry administrative records? Some theorize it's a priest's manual, blending hymns with practical instructions for sacrifices. Others suspect it's a legal code, intertwining divine law with civic duty. The real tragedy, we're seeing only half the conversation. The Liber Linteus was cut into strips before anyone realized its significance. so sentences end abruptly mid-thought. It's like listening to a phone call where only one side is audible. You catch words like purple cloth or libation, but the context dissolves into speculation. Even the mummy itself adds to the mystery. X-rays reveal it belonged to a young woman, possibly a traveler or merchant's wife, whose connection to this Etruscan scripture remains hauntingly opaque. Was she a devotee of an Etruscan cult in Alexandria, or just unlucky enough to be buried with someone else's sacred text? But here's what truly lingers. This linen manuscript survived precisely because it was repurposed, deemed more valuable as wrapping than writing. In that irony lies a profound lesson about how history gets preserved, not through careful archiving, but through accidents and indifference. While Roman authors dismissed Etruscan literature as backward, their words quietly outlasted empires, hidden in plain sight on a mummy's shroud. Every frayed edge of the Liber Linteus whispers the same urgent plea. Look closer, because the past often disguises its treasures as trash. And somewhere in those faded ink strokes, a civilization's heartbeat still pulses, waiting for the day we finally learn its rhythm. To understand the Etruscans, you must first understand how deeply they believed the divine spoke through the mundane. Nowhere is this more striking than in the liver of Piacenza, a palm-sized bronze model of a sheep's liver, meticulously divided into 40 sections, each labeled with cryptic Etruscan words. This wasn't just a medical oddity, it was a sacred map, a literal guide to interpreting the will of the gods. Imagine a priest holding this gleaming object aloft during a sacrifice, scrutinizing the real liver of a freshly slaughtered sheep, comparing its lobes and markings to the inscriptions before him. Every blemish, every vein became a message from the heavens, and those inscribed words, tinea, cell, lusa, were the keys to unlocking it. What makes this artifact so extraordinary isn't just its craftsmanship, but what it reveals about Etruscan spirituality. Unlike the Greeks or Romans who sought omens in birds or lightning, the Etruscans believed the liver was the universe in miniature. Each section corresponded to a region of the sky, ruled by specific deities. The word tinea, appearing multiple times, likely refers to their supreme sky god, but with prefixes like thur or ka, suggesting different aspects: tinea the thunderer, tinea the protector. Other terms like lusa or thesan might denote dawn or twilight, hinting at a celestial clock where time itself was divine. But here's where language and faith collide. The liver's inscriptions aren't just labels, they're fragments of a lost liturgical language. Some words resemble Latin or Greek, but their meanings twist unexpectedly. Sisra, for example, appears in other texts as the Etruscan name for the city of Servitory, yet on the liver, it's tucked between celestial terms. Was it a place in the heavens or a metaphor for a spiritual boundary? Without more context, every interpretation is a tightrope walk between linguistics and guesswork. The real breakthrough came when scholars noticed parallels with Mesopotamian divination practices. 1,000 years before the Etruscans, Babylonians also used liver models, and some zone names eerily overlap. Could this mean the Etruscans inherited an ancient Near Eastern tradition, adapting it to their own tongue? It's possible trade routes stretched across the Mediterranean, carrying not just goods but ideas. The liver becomes a cultural palimpsest, layers of belief etched into bronze. Yet for all its insights, the artifact leaves glaring gaps. Why 40 sections? Why divide the liver so symmetrically, like a cosmic pie chart? And most hauntingly, what prayers or incantations accompanied its use? The words are static, frozen without their ritual context. We see the notes, but the music is lost. What lingers is the realization that for the Etruscans, language wasn't just communication, it was communion. To read these inscriptions isn't just to decode a dead language, it's to witness a conversation with the divine, where every syllable bridged earth and sky. And as we trace those bronze-etched words with modern fingers, we're left wondering, if we could finally understand them, what secrets of the universe might they still whisper? The Romans may have conquered the Etruscans, but they never fully erased them, especially not from their own language. Tucked inside everyday Latin words are hidden fragments of Etruscan speech, like whispers trapped in stone. Take persona, the Latin term for a theatrical mask. It likely comes from the Etruscan word fursu, which referred to a masked figure in religious rituals. That's no coincidence. The Etruscans were masters of performance, turning funerals into dramatic spectacles where mourners wore masks to embody ancestors. When Rome adopted their theater traditions, they took the word tu, eventually giving us person in English, proof that even our modern vocabulary carries echoes of this lost culture. Then there's arena, derived from the Etruscan word for sand, harina, gladiatorial combat, that iconic Roman pastime. It traces back to Etruscan funeral games where warriors fought atop sandy pits to honor the dead. The Romans kept the sand and the name long after they forgot its origins. Even mundane terms like populus, people, might have Etruscan roots, possibly linked to papluna, a word found on ancient urns. These linguistic ghosts hint at a deeper truth. Rome didn't just defeat the Etruscans, it absorbed them layer by layer until their influence became invisible. But here's the catch: loanwords are more like breadcrumbs than a map. They reveal isolated terms, not grammar or syntax. We know the Etruscans called a magistrate a zilath because Romans borrowed the title for local officials in Etruria. We recognize satyrs as their word for year from calendar inscriptions. Yet without context, these words float untethered. Imagine finding pizza and pasta in an alien language dictionary centuries from now. You'd grasp their foods, but never taste the recipes or hear the dinner table chatter around them. The real frustration lies in what's missing. Latin authors rarely noted Etruscan words unless they were exotic or obsolete. Pliny the Elder mentions fulgur, a term for lightning divination, but dismisses it as archaic. Cicero jokes about Etruscan haruspices reading livers, yet never records their incantations. It's as if we're handed a handful of puzzle pieces from different boxes. Some fit, but the bigger picture stays blurred. Still, every borrowed word is a clue. When Latin texts refer to triumphus, their grand victory parade, they're echoing the Etruscan triumph, tied to their god Phufflons, a Dionysus-like figure. Even military terms like terma, cavalry unit, might come from term, an Etruscan name. These fragments suggest a world where Etruscan wasn't just a rival language, it was the substrate beneath Rome's foundations, shaping its rituals, governance, and even its wars. The bittersweet irony: the more Latin flourished, the more Etruscan faded. By the 1st century before the Common Era, only priests and antiquarians remembered the old tongue. Yet in that quiet vanishing act, something remarkable happened. Etruscan didn't die, it dissolved into Latin like sugar in water, leaving a sweetness we're still tasting today. Each loanword is a fossil, preserving not just a sound but a story, of masks worn in sacred dances, of sand stained with ceremonial blood, of a people who became ghosts in their own land, yet refused to be silenced. The Pyrgi Tablets gave us a glimpse into the Etruscan language, but they also exposed the frustrating limitations of bilingual texts. Think of it like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle with only a handful of edge pieces. You can see the outline, but the full picture remains maddeningly out of reach. The problem isn't just the scarcity of these artifacts, it's what they don't tell us. The Phoenician text on the tablets isn't a word-for-word translation, it's a looser, diplomatic version, like comparing a detailed contract to a handshake agreement. We can match words like king or temple, but entire phrases in Etruscan float without anchors, leaving linguists to guess at their meaning based on context alone. What makes this so different from cracking Egyptian hieroglyphs? The Rosetta Stone worked because it contained the same message in 3 scripts, each mirroring the others precisely. With Etruscan, we're piecing together a language without that mirrored reflection. The Pyrgi Tablets are more like a parallel conversation, 2 people discussing the same event but with different details emphasized. For example, the Phoenician text mentions the goddess Astarte, while the Etruscan version might reference their own deity, Uni, in a similar context. That gives us clues but not a full dictionary. Without longer, more varied bilingual texts, we're stuck reconstructing a language from scattered hints, like trying to learn French by memorizing a handful of restaurant menus. Another hurdle, the Etruscan language itself is unusually isolated. Most ancient languages belong to families. Latin has Romance descendants, Egyptian connects to Coptic, but Etruscan stands alone with no close relatives to compare it to. Even when we recognize a word, its grammar might defy expectations. Take the word clan, meaning son. It looks straightforward until you realize Etruscan doesn't follow Indo-European rules. Verbs don't conjugate predictably, and word order shifts like sand. Without a linguistic roadmap, every translation is an educated gamble. The real tragedy is how much has been lost. Roman historians like Claudius wrote volumes on Etruscan culture, including a dictionary now vanished to time. Imagine if just one of those books had survived. We might have the key to unlock everything. Instead, we're left with fragments, a merchant's ledger here, a tomb inscription there. Even the longest Etruscan text, the Liber Linteus, is a liturgical script without translation, like holding a songbook with no musical notes. So where does that leave us? Every new discovery, a pottery shard, a cursed tablet, adds another piece to the puzzle. But until we find another Rosetta Stone-level artifact, the Etruscan language will remain a conversation half-heard, a story with crucial pages torn out. And that's the heart of the mystery, not just deciphering words, but rebuilding a worldview from whispers. There's something poetic about using the cutting edge of modern technology to resurrect the oldest of voices. While scholars have pored over Etruscan inscriptions for centuries, today's linguists have a new ally: artificial intelligence. Imagine feeding thousands of fragmented texts into a machine, algorithms scouring every character for hidden patterns, like a digital detective reassembling a shattered vase. Projects like the Etruscan Language Project at the University of Massachusetts deploy statistical models to analyze word frequencies and syntax, hunting for grammatical rules that might have eluded human eyes. One breakthrough came when AI noticed that certain words like sigh or thir appeared consistently before names, suggesting they might be titles or kinship terms, clues to a social structure we're only beginning to map. But can machines truly grasp a language when even its cultural context is a mystery? Here's the catch: AI excels at spotting patterns, not meaning. It might identify that the word ziloth often appears near verbs of command, reinforcing its interpretation as a leadership title. Yet without understanding the rituals, laws, or daily life behind those words, the translations remain sterile. It's like teaching a computer to recognize musical notes but never letting it hear the melody. A team at Stanford learned this the hard way when their model mistook funeral inscriptions for love poetry. The syntax matched, but the context was utterly wrong. That's where hybrid approaches come in. By combining AI with traditional archaeology, researchers are bridging the gap. Take the Tabula Capuana, a 5th century before the Common Era clay tablet with 300 Etruscan lines. Machine learning sorted its words into categories: deities, months, offerings, while archaeologists cross-referenced them with artifacts from the same period. Suddenly, a phrase like the 3rd month to Catha aligned with spring equinox rituals, suggesting a ceremonial calendar. Together, tech and tradition are turning noise into signal. Yet the biggest hurdle might be the Etruscans themselves. Their language doesn't play by the rules we know. Most algorithms are trained on Indo-European languages like Latin or Greek, with predictable verb conjugations and noun cases. Etruscan, with its isolate status, defies these templates. When a Swiss team fed their AI a mix of Etruscan and unrelated languages like Basque, the system struggled to tell which was which. The very strangeness that makes this language fascinating also makes it resistant to digital cracking. So is there hope? Absolutely. Every new text scanned into databases like the Etruscan Texts Project adds fuel to the algorithmic fire. Some scholars dream of a neural Rosetta Stone, where AI could hypothetically compare untranslated Etruscan to known languages, searching for hidden overlaps. Others are crowdsourcing the puzzle, inviting amateur linguists to tag words in inscriptions, creating a human-machine collaboration. The irony is delicious. The same internet that homogenizes modern languages might yet resurrect one of antiquity's loneliest tongues. The truth is, technology won't solve this alone, but it's giving us a new lens, sharpening our gaze on inscriptions worn smooth by time. Maybe the key isn't choosing between silicon and scholarship, but letting them dance together. A digital oracle breathing life into clay and bronze, one glyph at a time. Archaeology and linguistics are like two detectives working the same case. One dusts off the artifacts, the other deciphers their stories. Nowhere is this partnership more thrilling than at Poggio Colla, an Etruscan site in Italy's Mugello Valley, where every summer, archaeologists brush away centuries of dirt to reveal inscriptions that haven't been read in millennia. In 2016, they unearthed a slab of sandstone with 70 letters carved into its surface, the longest Etruscan text found in decades. But here's the twist: it wasn't in a tomb or temple. This stone lay buried near what was once a bustling workshop, its words likely tied to trade or craft. That's the magic of archaeology. It doesn't just give us words, it gives us the context those words lived in. Suddenly, a term like Zilath isn't just a title on a grave marker, it's a signature on a business ledger, hinting at how Etruscan elites controlled commerce. What makes Poggio Colla so special isn't just the volume of finds, it's their variety. Over 30 years of digs have yielded everything from delicate gold pendants inscribed with dedications to ceramic shards scribbled with merchant tallies. One pottery fragment bears a single word, vinum, wine. It's a mundane label, but it speaks volumes. The Etruscans weren't just exporting wine, they were branding it, etching their language onto everyday objects. That's how languages truly survive, not just in grand monuments, but in the fingerprints of daily life. And with each new layer of soil peeled back, we're finding more of those fingerprints. But archaeology's greatest gift might be its surprises. In 2019, a team at Vols discovered a 6th century before the Common Era stele, a towering stone slab covered in Etruscan script. The kicker: it was recycled. Romans had repurposed it as a building block, flipping it face down in a wall. For 2,000 years, its words pressed silently against the earth, waiting. The text includes the name Tersekina, likely a woman, and the word Secha, possibly meaning sacred. Was this a memorial, a land deed? Every new letter deepens the mystery. The real challenge lies in the fragile dance between discovery and interpretation. Take the enigmatic Sippus Perusinus, a boundary marker from Perugia. Its 246 words are meticulously carved, yet their meaning remains debated. Is it a property dispute, a treaty? Without the original landscape it once demarcated, the text floats untethered. That's why modern digs now pair trowels with 3D scanners, mapping inscriptions in situ to capture every contextual clue, the angle of a chisel mark, the wear patterns around a glyph. Even soil chemistry matters. Traces of ink on a seemingly blank stone can reveal vanished texts. The stakes couldn't be higher. Less than 1% of known Etruscan sites have been excavated, and urbanization threatens untold artifacts. A farmer's plow might slice through a buried temple wall tomorrow, or a storm could erode a hillside hiding an entire archive. Yet the promise of discovery keeps the hunt alive. Imagine unearthing a bilingual ledger from a port city, or a poet's scroll preserved in the oxygen-starved mud of a forgotten well. The Etruscans wrote on linen, lead, wax, materials that rarely survive. But somewhere, against all odds, a cache might endure, its letters crisp as the day they were pressed into clay. That's the heart of archaeology's role. It's not just about finding words, but finding the world those words describe. Every fragment is a bridge, a way to hear the Etruscans not as silent statues, but as traders haggling over wine prices, priests chanting over bronze livers, or mothers etching their children's names into history. And with each scrape of the trowel, we're one stroke closer to joining that conversation. Etruscan grammar is like a puzzle where half the pieces are missing, but the ones we have tell a fascinating story. Unlike Latin or Greek, which follow familiar Indo-European patterns, Etruscan sentences dance to their own rhythm. Take word order. In Latin, you'd say, "The king sees the soldier," with subject-verb-object clarity. But an Etruscan inscription might arrange those same words as "soldier the king sees," or even "sees king the soldier." At first glance, it seems chaotic, but linguists have spotted a method to the madness. Nouns often carry suffixes that mark their role in the sentence, like S for possessives or L for indirect objects. That means word order could be flexible, more about emphasis than strict rules. Imagine speaking a language where you could rearrange phrases like poetry, trusting endings to hold the meaning together. One of the biggest breakthroughs came from studying grave markers, where repetitive phrases revealed grammatical patterns. The formula X son of Y appears constantly, but in Etruscan it's X clan Y with clan meaning son. Here's the twist: Y, the father's name, often gets a suffix like S or L, showing possession or lineage. This tiny detail unlocked a key to noun cases, the way words change to indicate relationships. We now know Etruscan had at least 4 cases, similar to Latin's nominative, genitive, and dative, but with quirks. For example, the genitive case showing ownership might use S for some names but L for others, hinting at dialects or hidden rules we haven't cracked yet. Verbs are even more enigmatic. Most Etruscan inscriptions are short, so full sentences are rare, but the ones we have suggest verbs often cluster at the end, like a punchline waiting to land. The Pyrgi Tablets include phrases like "Tiberius Velianus gave this gift," where the verb "gave" tucks neatly at the close. Yet other texts scatter verbs mid-sentence, leaving scholars debating whether tense or mood affected placement. And here's the real headache: Etruscan verbs don't conjugate predictably. In Latin, amo means I love, amas means you love, clear patterns. Etruscan. A verb like zichach, to write, might morph into zichund in the past tense, but without enough examples, we're left guessing at the system. What makes this grammar so tantalizing is how it defies expectations. The Etruscan word for year is avil, but its plural isn't avils, it's avilschai, with that mysterious chai sound. Some nouns pluralize by doubling vowels, like clan, son becoming klenar, sons. These irregularities suggest a language that evolved organically, absorbing influences from neighbors while guarding its core identity. Even pronouns are slippery. My means I, but mini might be me, and un could be you or maybe yours. Without longer texts, these words float in grammatical limbo. The real frustration and fascination is that Etruscan grammar might not fit any known template. Linguists have tried comparing it to Basque, another ancient isolate, or to the pre-Indo-European languages of the Mediterranean, but every theory hits a wall. Maybe Etruscan structure reflects a worldview where relationships mattered more than rigid hierarchies, where a name's ending could tell you its story without needing a fixed sentence order. Or perhaps we're missing a Rosetta Stone-level text that would suddenly make everything click. For now, each grammatical clue is a breadcrumb. The Liber Lintius's repetitive rituals suggest verbs of offering followed strict formulas. The Piacenza liver's labeled zones imply a specialized vocabulary for divination, where nouns took on sacred meanings, and every tomb inscription with Zilath or Perth, a word possibly meaning magistrate or priest, hints at a society where titles flex to fit roles. Grammar isn't just rules, it's the shape of thought, and as we slowly assemble Etruscan skeletal structure, we're not just rebuilding a language, we're reconstructing how an entire civilization saw the world, one cryptic suffix at a time. Names hold power, especially when they've survived 2.5 millennia. Step into an Etruscan tomb, and you won't just find bones and artifacts. You'll meet entire families frozen in time through meticulously carved names. Take the Tarchna clan, whose members pop up across central Italy like breadcrumbs in a historical trail. Their name alone, linked to the city of Tarquinia, whispers of political dynasties, since Rome's last kings bore the name Tarquinius, an Etruscan family that once ruled the fledgling city. Or the Velthina family, whose inscriptions span generations, revealing how women like Lath I Velthina kept their birth names even after marriage, a practice that set Etruscan society apart from their Greek and Roman neighbors. What makes these names so revealing isn't just their sounds, it's their structure. Etruscan naming conventions followed a rhythmic pattern. A first name, often gender-specific like Lath for men or Thanchval for women, paired with a family name ending in Na or Sa. But here's the twist. Children sometimes carried their mother's name too, as seen in inscriptions like Aunt Velthina, son of Lath and Velia. This dual lineage wasn't just clerical. It hinted at a society where women's status was woven into the very fabric of identity. Compare that to Rome, where women were often nameless in records, mere daughter of Claudius footnotes. The tombs themselves became family archives. In the Banditaxia necropolis, sarcophagi are labeled like chapters in a genealogical novel. One reads, I am Lath Tut, son of Anth and Ramtha, husband of Thania. Another adds, here lies Velia, daughter of Laris, mother of 3. These aren't dry epitaphs, they're social contracts. The repetition of titles like Zilath, magistrate, or Maru, a religious official across generations, shows how power and piety were inherited. Even nicknames surface. Pavtna, meaning little one, or Avile, a possible reference to longevity, proving Etruscan wasn't just bureaucratic, it was deeply personal. But names also betray upheavals. Later inscriptions start blending Etruscan and Latin, like Aulus Spurina, a hybrid name from a time when Etruscan elites were becoming Roman citizens. The shift from Velthina to Volumnius mirrors a culture in transition, its language softening at the edges under Rome's weight, yet some clung fiercely to tradition. A 1st century before the Common Era tomb in Perugia bears the defiantly Etruscan name, Larus Pulina, his lineage stretching back 6 generations, a final act of resistance against assimilation. The real magic lies in the mundane. A pottery shard from a kitchen might bear the name Tite, a servant or child scrawling their mark. A bronze mirror gifted to a bride is inscribed to Velia from her brother Lath. These fragments humanize a civilization often reduced to art and warfare. When we read Avul Vipinas, the Etruscan form of Aulus Vibina, a mercenary chief later celebrated by Romans, we're not just decoding letters, we're meeting a man whose exploits bridge 2 worlds. So why does this matter? Because names are more than labels, they're cultural DNA. The Etruscan habit of memorializing mothers alongside fathers speaks to gender roles far more balanced than their contemporaries. Their blending of native and foreign names mirrors the tensions of a people caught between tradition and transformation. And when we trace the Tarchna from their heyday in Tarquinia to their faded mentions in Roman chronicles, we're watching history unfold 1 syllable at a time. Each name is a knot in a vast, unspooling thread, one that ties the Etruscans not just to their past but to ours. If you want to hear the Etruscans speak with urgency, listen to their curses. Picture this, a thin sheet of lead, crumpled and buried 2,000 years ago, etched with jagged letters spelling out a plea for divine vengeance. May the one who stole my cloak be struck blind, reads one from the town of Telamon. Another, found near Lake Trasimeno, invokes the gods to bind the tongue of my enemy so he cannot testify against me. These weren't idle threats, they were rituals. The act of inscribing a curse, folding the metal, and piercing it with nails transformed words into weapons, hurling them into the spiritual realm with chilling precision. The Etruscans didn't just worship their gods, they negotiated with them. Votive offerings, often bronze or terracotta figurines, bore inscriptions like Tinia Thanra, a dedication to Tinia, their sky god. But here's the fascinating part. These weren't generic prayers. A liver-shaped bronze plaque from Pesaro reads, "To Uni and Menova, I, Velia, give this in thanks for my child's health." Specific deities, specific requests. Uni, their mother goddess, often received pleas tied to fertility, while Menova, their version of Athena, was invoked for wisdom in legal disputes. The gods weren't distant, they were partners in daily life, their names pressed into clay or metal like entries in a celestial ledger. Nowhere is this intimacy clearer than in the Liber Linteus, that linen manuscript wrapped around a mummy. While much of its meaning eludes us, repetitive phrases like Sursynth Seapen suggest a liturgy, a call and response between priests and the divine. Compare that to the Tabula Capuana, a calendar marking sacred days with instructions like, on the 3rd moon, sacrifice a ram to Catha. Together, they paint a religion of meticulous order where every ritual had its time, every offering its proper words. But religion wasn't just about harmony. The Etruscans feared divine wrath as much as they sought favor. A lead tablet from Marzabotto curses an entire family, invoking Selvans, god of the wild, to strike their fields with blight. Another, found in a gravesite, warns trespassers that whoever disturbs these bones will face the fury of Charon, their demonic ferryman of the dead. These texts reveal a world view where the sacred and the sinister coexisted, where gods could heal or destroy, and language was the thread connecting both. The real revelation, how personal these texts feel. A votive statue of a baby bears the inscription, "Lathia gave me to Tiran, the love goddess after a safe birth." A broken amphora shard scribbled with Fufluns, their Dionysus hints at a tavern keeper's prayer for good wine. even curses had a raw humanity. One tablet from Volterra doesn't just demand justice for a stolen ring, it begs the thief's hands to wither like autumn leaves. What emerges isn't just a list of deities, but a dialogue, a civilization speaking to the divine in words of gratitude, desperation, and rage. Every scratched letter, whether on gold or lead, was a bridge between worlds. And as we decipher them, we're not just translating a dead language, we're eavesdropping on conversations that once shaped lives, deaths, and everything in between. Trade wasn't just about goods for the Etruscans, it was about words, scratched onto the shoulders of wine amphorae, stamped onto lead ingots, or hastily scrawled on pottery shards. Their commercial inscriptions are like receipts from a 2,000-year-old marketplace. Take the Pithos of Pechmaho, a 5th century before the Common Era storage jar found in southern France. Its side bears a mix of Etruscan and Greek, recording a transaction involving olive oil and wine. The Etruscan word elinu jumps out, likely meaning oil paired with Greek numerals. This wasn't just a label, it was a bilingual handshake, proof that even in antiquity, business demanded linguistic flexibility. The real goldmine lies in the mundane details. A broken cup from the port of Spina reads, "My fleers," possibly meaning, "I am the cup of fleer." Another, from Servitory, lists 300 alongside a crude drawing of a ship, hinting at bulk orders. These fragments reveal a vocabulary of commerce far removed from the grandeur of temple inscriptions. Words like zitu, to write, appear on merchant seals, while thuva, gift or payment, pops up on trade agreements. Even coins tell stories. The Etruscan mint city of Populonia stamped its silver with papluna, but nearby Volterra's coins bore velathri, local pride etched into currency. Who were their trading partners? The Phoenicians topped the list, exchanging purple dye and glass for Etruscan iron. Greek colonies in Campania bartered pottery and olive oil, while Celtic tribes north of the Alps traded amber and salt. A lead tablet from the Tuscan coast mentions Carthage, likely a reference to Carthaginians, with quantities of copper and timber negotiated in a pidgin of Etruscan and Punic. The Mediterranean was a linguistic bazaar, and the Etruscans were fluent haggler, but commerce wasn't just practical, it was personal. A wine amphora from Vols bears the note, "Aunt gave this to Laris," blurring the line between ledger and love letter. Another, found in a shipwreck off Corsica, mourns a lost shipment with Sathina, a tomb marker term, as if the cargo itself deserved a memorial. These weren't cold transactions, they were threads in a social fabric, woven with trust and rivalry. The ultimate irony, trade may hold the key to cracking Etruscans' everyday speech. While temple texts are formal and tombs poetic, merchant scrolls capture the living language, the slang of sailors, the shorthand of smiths. A single word like trutant, perhaps measure, on a set of bronze scales could unlock a dozen lost conversations. Every scratched number, every scrawled name is a whisper across the ages, proving that even in silence, the marketplace never sleeps. The origins of the Etruscan language read like a detective novel with missing pages. Every clue leads to more questions. For centuries, scholars have wrestled with a fundamental mystery. Was this tongue a lone survivor of some ancient linguistic family, or does it share hidden roots with other civilizations? The debate begins with Herodotus, the Greek historian who claimed the Etruscans migrated from Lydia in modern-day Turkey. He described a famine so severe that King Aetes sent half his people west, where they became the Racina, the name the Etruscans called themselves. It's a compelling story, but here's the catch. Herodotus was writing centuries after the fact, and his account clashes with DNA evidence showing Etruscan genes matched both Anatolian and local Italian populations. Then there's the linguistic puzzle. Etruscan shares eerie similarities with Lemnian, a language spoken on the Greek island of Lemnos. A 6th century before the Common Era stele found there bears inscriptions like Holayashi Phokias, which resembles Etruscan phrases like Holchiasi, possibly meaning dedicated. Could this mean the Etruscans were part of a broader pre-Indo-European network stretching across the Aegean? Some linguists see traces of an even older layer, the mysterious Teosinian language family, a hypothetical group linking Etruscan, Lemnian, and Rhetic, a tongue spoken in the Alps. The Rhetic connection is tantalizing. Inscriptions from the Adige Valley use similar letter shapes and words like Zinu, son, echoing Etruscan, clan. But skeptics counter with isolation theory. They argue Etruscan's unique grammar, like its non-Indo-European verb structures, proves it evolved separately, a linguistic island amidst the flood of Indo-European tongues surrounding it. The Pyrgi Tablets bilingual text offers little help. Phoenician is Semitic, unrelated to Etruscan's enigmatic core. Even loanwords tell a fractured story. While Etruscan borrowed Greek letters, its vocabulary resists easy categorization. Words like eyes, god, or thuva, offering, have no clear cousins elsewhere. Modern science has thrown gasoline on the debate. Recent DNA studies of Etruscan remains show a genetic cocktail, steppe pastoralist ancestry mixed with Neolithic Italian and Bronze Age Anatolian markers. This suggests multiple migration waves, not a single exodus from Lydia. One theory posits that Etruscan descended from an ancient Teosinian tongue spoken by seafarers who crisscrossed the Mediterranean before the rise of Rome. Others propose it's a relic of Italy's pre-Indo-European inhabitants, the enigmatic Villanovan culture whose ironworking prowess mirrors Etruscan metallurgy. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Etruscan is connected to Lemnian or Rhetic, it could unlock lost branches of human migration. If it's truly isolated, it represents a linguistic dead end, a civilization that thought in ways we may never fully grasp. Every untranslated word is a potential Rosetta Stone, waiting to reveal whether this language was a solitary wanderer or part of a forgotten family. Until then, the origins of Etruscan remain a riddle wrapped in a script, buried under millennia of dust and debate. Buried beneath the streets of modern Perugia lies a slab of limestone that might just hold the key to understanding Etruscan justice. The Perugia Sippus, standing nearly a meter tall, bears one of the longest Etruscan inscriptions ever found, 130 words meticulously carved in precise rows. At first glance, it looks like bureaucracy frozen in stone, but lean closer and you'll sense the pulse of a legal system at work. The text repeats phrases like thuva thuncula and zil si marankul, likely meaning boundary marker and magistrate's decree, hinting at a property dispute settled centuries before Rome's 12 tables. What makes this slab so revolutionary isn't just its length, it's its structure. Legal texts follow patterns, and the Sippus reads like a contract template. Names appear in formulaic sequences. Arnth Velemna, son of Laris, borders Larth Kusu, son of Laris, suggesting two parties to an agreement. The word esren crops up repeatedly, possibly meaning witness or signature, while chalar, boundary, anchors specific geographic references. Like a detective reconstructing a crime scene from scattered clues, linguists have mapped these terms to theorize the document might record the sale of vineyard land, complete with penalties for trespass. But here's where it gets thorny. Without parallel translations, every interpretation leans on guesswork. Take the phrase vasil tir, Some argue it means water rights, crucial for irrigation disputes. Others propose it's a ritual term tying the contract to Etruscan religious law. The truth, both could be right. Etruscan society didn't separate civic and sacred realms the way we do. A land deal might require blessings from Tinia, their sky god, just as much as a magistrate's seal. The Sippus also cracks open a window on Etruscan governance. Words like Zilath Mechel Rasnal suggest a federation of city-states, Rasnal being their term for Etruria, with shared legal codes. Compare that to Rome's early laws, which historians now suspect borrowed heavily from Etruscan models. Even the slab's physical placement matters. Found near an ancient gate, it might have served as a public notice, blending law with urban planning, yet the stone guards its secrets fiercely. A passage reading Sai Aval Suthai could mean for 3 years or until death, a staggering difference in contractual terms. And why does the text switch midway from left to right to left, like a scribe correcting himself? These quirks remind us that for all our progress, we're still outsiders peering into a world where every chisel stroke carried weight. The real triumph of the Sippus isn't in definitive translations, it's in revealing how sophisticated Etruscan society truly was. This wasn't some primitive culture, it had notaries, surveyors, and courts. When Romans boasted of their legal brilliance, they stood on shoulders they never acknowledged. And as sunlight glints off those ancient letters today, the stone whispers a truth louder than any decree. Civilizations aren't remembered by their art alone, but by the rules they lived by. The vibrant frescoes of the Tomb of the Leopards don't just dazzle the eye, they might just hold the key to unlocking the Etruscan voice. Step inside this 4th century before the Common Era burial chamber in Tarquinia, and you're greeted by a riot of color, banqueters reclining on couches, musicians strumming lyres, and of course, the iconic leopards guarding the scene. But look closer, the gestures here aren't random. A raised hand, a pointed finger, a cup lifted in toast. Each motion could be a visual echo of spoken phrases lost to time. That man with his palm outstretched toward the wine jug. Scholars suggest his posture mirrors the Etruscan word, thuva, often found in inscriptions meaning offering or gift. The woman adjusting her garland might embody zichach, the verb to adorn, seen on votive statues. What makes these paintings so tantalizing is their narrative quality. Unlike Greek art, which idealized forms, Etruscan frescoes burst with action dancers mid-twirl, servants pouring wine, couples locking eyes. This isn't static decoration, it's storytelling. And just as comic books use visual shorthand, a light bulb for an idea, a heart for love, Etruscan artists may have embedded linguistic cues in their imagery. Take the recurring motif of the egg, clutched by figures in multiple tombs. In Latin, ovum symbolized rebirth, but Etruscan funerary inscriptions use the word allure for egg, linking it to phrases about the soul's journey. When a painted hand cradles that egg, is it illustrating a spoken prayer for the deceased? Symbols cross the divide between art and language seamlessly. The zigzag pattern framing banquet scenes resembles the Etruscan letter S, which also appears in inscriptions about sval, meaning to live or life force. Even colors carry weight. The deep red ochre dominating these walls isn't just aesthetic, it mirrors the word rasna, their term for their own people, tying identity to pigment. And then there's the enigmatic lhasa, winged spirits fluttering across tomb ceilings. These figures often hover near inscriptions with verbs like trin, possibly meaning to protect, suggesting they're not just decorative but visual translations of invocations. The real breakthrough came when linguists noticed how tomb art aligns with rare bilingual texts. A scene in the Tomb of the Shields shows a warrior receiving a helmet from a woman, a visual parallel to the Pyrgi Tablets phrase, "Uni gave the king the crown." Suddenly, art becomes a Rosetta Stone with recurring compositions acting like grammatical structures. The frequent killing of the captive motif, for instance, might correlate to cursed tablets using the verb zak, meaning to strike. Yet for all these connections, ambiguity lingers. Without a living cultural context, we're left interpreting silent gestures. Does the raised index finger in the Tomb of the Augurs signify a number, a warning, or a divine salute? When a figure points to their ear, is it the artist's shorthand for listen, or merely a casual gesture? The Etruscans left no manuals explaining their visual language, leaving us to decode their art like a lip reader straining to catch syllables in the wind. What's undeniable is how deeply text and image intertwined in their world. A funeral urn isn't just carved with a face, it's inscribed with the deceased's name, lineage, and sometimes even a snippet of poetry. A mirror isn't merely polished bronze, it's etched with mythological scenes labeled in elegant script, as if the owner needed words to anchor the reflection. This wasn't art for art's sake, it was art as conversation, a dialogue between the seen and the spoken, where every brushstroke might be a syllable waiting to be sounded. And as we stand in these tombs today, surrounded by figures frozen mid-gesture, we're not just observers, we're eavesdroppers on a language where color, form, and word were never meant to be parted. History is full of bold claims about cracking the Etruscan code, grand announcements that fizzled under scrutiny. Take the infamous case of 19th century scholar Alessandro Morandi, who declared he'd translated an entire Etruscan funerary text by comparing it to Hebrew. His breakthrough, a supposed match between the Etruscan word mulu and the Hebrew moloch, linking them both to sacrificial rites, the academic world initially cheered until linguists pointed out the fatal flaw. While Moloch referred to a Semitic deity, Mulu appeared on dozens of Etruscan grave markers, clearly denoting familial relationships, not rituals. Morandi had cherry-picked similarities while ignoring context, a cautionary tale about forcing modern frameworks onto ancient words. Then there's the bizarre saga of the Etruscan-Venetic connection, a theory that flourished in the 1930s. Italian linguist Carlo Battisti argued that Etruscan and Venetic, a lesser-known Italic language, shared roots based on superficial resemblances like the suffix "-ki". For a time, his charts of parallel verbs dazzled conferences, but when excavations in Padua uncovered bilingual Venetic Latin inscriptions, the supposed links crumbled. Venetic was firmly Indo-European, while Etruscan structure remained alien. The lesson: coincidental resemblances can blind even seasoned scholars to deeper grammatical truths. More recently, the allure of high-tech shortcuts has led to fresh stumbles. In 2014, a team using algorithmic analysis claimed Etruscan was a form of early Hungarian, pointing to shared words like ter, meaning to give, in Hungarian and appearing in Etruscan as thir. The media erupted with headlines about a mystery solved, until specialists noted that thir appeared exclusively in religious Etruscan texts, likely meaning offering rather than a generic verb. The algorithms had mapped sounds without capturing cultural nuance, proving that machines can't replace human judgment when context is key. These failures aren't just footnotes, they're masterclasses in linguistic humility. When Renaissance scholars tried reading Etruscan as a corrupted Latin dialect, they missed its unique grammar. When Victorian spiritualists insisted the language held Atlantean secrets, they turned scholarship into spectacle. Each misstep reveals a pattern, the temptation to impose familiar narratives on the unfamiliar. the Etruscans didn't leave a Rosetta Stone because their world didn't operate by our rules. Their language reflects a mindset that valued fluidity, where a word like eyes could mean God, prayer, or omen depending on the ritual, yet dead ends aren't dead losses. Every disproven theory tightens the focus. Morandi's Hebrew mishap taught us to prioritize inscription contexts over isolated words. The Venetic debacle underscored the importance of grammatical structure over vocabulary lists. Even the Hungarian detour reinforced that languages aren't just data sets, they're living systems tied to culture. Today's scholars wield these hard-won lessons like forensic tools, sifting through Etruscan texts with a patience that would have baffled their predecessors. The irony, some failed approaches contained kernels of truth. The Teosinian hypothesis, once dismissed as fringe, now gains traction with evidence linking Etruscan to Lemnian. What seemed like wild speculation in the 1950s looks prescient today. This is the dance of decipherment, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, with every misread word still a clue in the grand puzzle. And as long as untranslated texts wait in museum vaults and buried tombs, the Etruscan's voice remains a whisper we're learning slowly to hear. The island of Lemnos sits like a sentinel in the northern Aegean, its volcanic soil holding secrets far older than its Greek inhabitants. In 1885, archaeologists digging near the ancient city of Hephaestia unearthed a slab of stone that would send shockwaves through linguistic circles, the Lemnos stele. Covered in angular letters, its inscription began with a word that made scholars catch their breath, Holayashi. For anyone familiar with Etruscan, the resemblance to their word, Holchiasi, was uncanny. Here, over 200 miles from Etruria, was a language that seemed to echo across the waves, whispering of connections no one had dared to imagine. What makes this stele so electrifying isn't just the words themselves, it's their structure. The text follows patterns that feel hauntingly Etruscan. Names end in shachek or ai, mirroring Etruscan suffixes like s or aya. Verbs cluster at sentence endings just as they do in the Pyrgi Tablets. Even the alphabet is nearly identical, with characters like the zigzagging M and the trident-shaped S appearing in both scripts. The stele's opening line, Holayashi Phokias Avish Silchives, could almost be transplanted into an Etruscan funeral inscription, where phrases like Avis Sathina mark burial sites. These aren't vague similarities, they're grammatical fingerprints pointing to a shared ancestry. But here's the twist, Lemnos wasn't some Etruscan colony. The island belonged to a pre-Greek people the ancients called Tyrrhenians, a name Romans later used for the Etruscans themselves. This isn't a case of one culture borrowing from another. It's evidence of a deeper, older linguistic layer stretching across the Mediterranean. The stele's date around the 6th century before the Common Era places it squarely in the era when Etruscan city-states were flourishing, suggesting these languages weren't just related, they were branches of the same ancient tree. Could Lemnian help crack Etruscan? In theory, yes, if we had more of it. The stele's 40 lines are frustratingly brief, mostly listing names and fragmentary phrases. Unlike the Pyrgi Tablets, there's no bilingual text to cross-reference, yet even these shards offer clues. The word Silchives appears repeatedly, likely meaning 50, similar to Etruscan Silchiles. The name Holayash might correspond to Etruscan Holchai, possibly denoting a religious title. These parallels become a linguistic bridge, however fragile, allowing scholars to test Etruscan vocabulary against its island cousin. The implications ripple outward. If Lemnian and Etruscan share roots, they might belong to the elusive Teosinian family, a hypothetical language group that could include Rhetic, spoken in the Alps. Imagine a network of interconnected tongues stretching from the Aegean to the Po Valley, all tracing back to a common ancestor lost to time. The Lemnos stele becomes not an anomaly, but a missing piece in a puzzle we're only beginning to assemble. Yet mysteries linger. Why did these languages leave so few traces? How did they diverge? The stele stands alone on Lemnos with no other lengthy inscriptions found. Its isolation mirrors the Etruscan predicament, flashes of brilliance surrounded by silence. Some theorize these languages were remnants of a pre-Indo-European world, spoken by seafaring cultures who once dominated the Mediterranean before being absorbed or erased. Others see them as linguistic refugees, carried westward by migrations we're still mapping through pottery shards and DNA. What's undeniable is the stele's power to haunt. When the morning sun strikes its worn surface, those angular letters seem to pulse with unread stories of sailors and soldiers, priests and poets, whose voices merged into the waves. For all our advances, we're left with the same burning question: was this stone a farewell or an invitation? Until another artifact surfaces to answer, the stele remains a beacon, casting its light on the dark waters between knowing and guessing. Drive through the rolling hills of Tuscany today, and you're tracing the ghostly outlines of Etruria itself. Towns like Tarquinia, Volterra, and Perugia aren't just picturesque stops, they're living palimpsests, their very names whispered down from Etruscan times. Tarquinia derives from Tarchna, the Etruscan name for their powerful city-state. Volterra, that's Velathri in Etruscan, a hub of alabaster trade. Even the Tiber River, Rome's lifeline, likely takes its name from the Etruscan word thuffle, meaning deep. These aren't accidental survivals, they're proof that landscapes have long memories, clinging to syllables long after the speakers have vanished. But the legacy runs deeper than geography. Peel back the layers of Italian folklore, and you'll find Etruscan shadows lurking in the strangest places. Take the Strega, Italy's iconic witch figure. Her rituals reading entrails, interpreting lightning, mirror the Etruscan haruspex priests who divined the future from sheep livers. The famous Malocchio, evil eye superstition. It echoes Etruscan lead curse tablets that invoked gods to strike enemies with blindness. Even the beloved Italian tradition of the passeggiata, the evening stroll, might trace back to Etruscan funeral processions where mourners paraded through streets to honor the dead. Then there's the food. The Etruscans were famed for their vineyards long before the Romans perfected winemaking. Today's Vino Nobile di Montepulciano grows in soil first cultivated by Etruscan hands. Their love of wild boar lives on in Tuscany's singhiale dishes, and the flatbread paella of Emilia-Romagna may descend from the Etruscan testo, a hearth-baked loaf. These aren't just culinary holdovers, they're flavors preserved like artifacts, passed mouth to mouth across millennia. Artisans still channel Etruscan craftsmanship, though they might not realize it. The gold filigree of Arezzo's jewelers mirrors techniques from the Chimera of Arezzo, a bronze masterpiece. Volterra's alabaster carvers used tools nearly identical to those found in Etruscan tombs. Even the Baccaro pottery, with its distinctive black glaze, inspires modern ceramists who revive its techniques. The Etruscans didn't just make objects, they encoded their worldview in clay and metal, and that vision still shapes hands today. Perhaps the most haunting survivals are the festivals. In Merlot, locals reenact an Etruscan wedding each summer, complete with archaic vows. Tarquinia's Etruscan night fills the necropolis with torchlight and harp music, reviving banquets depicted on tomb walls. These aren't mere tourist spectacles, they're acts of cultural memory, stitching the present to a past that refuses to fade. The real magic lies in the ordinary. When a Tuscan farmer plows his field and turns up a shard of Baquero, when a child in Chiusi learns her town's Etruscan name is Clebson, when a winemaker in Orvieto tends vines first planted 25 centuries ago, these are the moments when the Etruscans cease to be a vanished civilization and become neighbors, their voices carried on the wind through the cypress trees. Language may fade, but dirt and stone and tradition remember, and in that remembering, the Etruscans are never truly gone. There's a particular ache that comes with standing before an Etruscan inscription, knowing the words are right there, carved in stone, yet their meaning slips through your fingers like smoke. It's not just the frustration of an unsolved puzzle, it's the weight of a whole world hovering just out of reach. Why does the silence of a dead language echo so loudly in us? Perhaps because language isn't just about communication, it's about connection. When we lose a tongue like Etruscan, we're not losing vocabulary. We're losing the laughter at a banquet, the lullabies sung to children, the arguments in market squares. These were people who loved, grieved, and dreamed in words we can't fully grasp, and that loss throbs like a phantom limb in the body of history. Think of the last time you overheard a conversation in a language you didn't understand. There's a loneliness to it, a sense of being shut out from something vibrant and alive. Now multiply that by 25 centuries. The Etruscans left us stunning art, intricate tombs, and echoes of their rituals, but without their words, it's like watching a film on mute. We see the gestures but miss the jokes, the whispers, the gasps. That's why scholars spend lifetimes chasing fragments. A single deciphered word can snap a moment into focus. When we learned that Suth-I likely means tomb, those silent graves suddenly had labels. When Zilath was tied to leadership, hierarchies in frescoes made sense. Each small victory isn't just academic, it's a reunion, but this isn't just about the past. Lost languages force us to confront how fragile our own stories are. The Etruscans weren't some obscure tribe. They ruled Italy for centuries, influenced Rome's rise, and then vanished as a spoken tongue. If that can happen to them, what whispers of ours might fade? In a way, every effort to revive Etruscan is a rebellion against oblivion, a refusal to let time have the last word. It's no coincidence that modern Tuscans still bake bread in Etruscan shapes or name vineyards after ancient gods. These aren't empty gestures, they're ropes thrown across the abyss trying to pull something back. The emotional pull goes deeper than nostalgia. Languages are fingerprints of thought. The way Etruscan blended ritual and daily life into single words, or gave women equal naming rights in inscriptions, tells us they saw the world differently. Recovering their language isn't just filling gaps, it's discovering whole new ways to be human. When we stand in a tomb and read Velia, daughter of Laris, we're not just translating, we're restoring dignity to a voice erased by conquest. And then there's the sheer thrill of the hunt. There's something irresistibly human about staring at a jumble of letters and thinking, I will understand you. It's the same drive that sends us up mountains or into space. The Pyrgi Tablets, the Liber Lintius, these are our Everest, our moon landing. Every scratched lead curse or wine jug label is a message in a bottle, and we can't resist opening it. So we keep listening, even when the whispers are faint, because in the end, the Etruscans aren't just a civilization we study, they're a mirror. Their silence reminds us how much beauty and wisdom vanish when languages die, and how much wonder awaits when we fight to bring them back. There's something irresistibly magnetic about a mystery that refuses to be solved, and the Etruscans have perfected that allure. From Dan Brown's Inferno, weaving their enigmatic language into a global conspiracy, to documentaries framing their tombs as gateways to lost worlds, pop culture can't resist their siren call. But why does a civilization that vanished over 2 millennia ago still grip our imagination? It's not just the gaps in their history, it's the tantalizing way those gaps invite us to play detective. The Etruscans are the ultimate cold case, and every fragment of their language feels like a clue waiting to crack the story wide open. Consider the sheer drama of their silence. Here was a people who shaped Rome's rise, whose art and rituals echo through Western culture, yet whose voices were erased so thoroughly that even the Romans forgot their words. That paradox is catnip for storytellers. Hollywood thrives on ancient enigmas, but the Etruscans offer something rarer than Egyptian pyramids or Mayan calendars, a puzzle where the pieces are scattered but not entirely lost. Every new inscription discovered in a farmer's field or beneath a museum's storage shelf carries the electric possibility of revelation. It's the intellectual equivalent of a treasure hunt where the prize isn't gold but meaning itself. The fascination also taps into something deeper, our collective fear of being forgotten. The Etruscans built cities that rivaled Athens, yet their literature dissolved into dust. Their language, once vibrant in marketplaces and temples, survives only in broken phrases. That fragility mirrors our own anxieties in the digital age. Will our tweets and texts endure, or will we too become a civilization of half-read whispers? When we obsess over deciphering Etruscan curses or love poems, we're not just solving a linguistic riddle, we're asserting that no voice, no matter how ancient, should be silenced forever. Then there's the romance of the outsider narrative. The Etruscans defied categorization, a non-Indo-European island in a sea of familiar tongues. Their isolation makes them the underdogs of antiquity, a people whose uniqueness became their downfall. Modern audiences root for them like we root for lost causes: Tolkien's elves, Atlantis, any civilization that carried beauty into the shadows. Even their artifacts seem to lean into the mystery. That haunting smile on the sarcophagus of the spouses isn't just art, it's a smirk, as if the Etruscans knew we'd spend centuries staring at their words without understanding the joke. But perhaps the biggest draw is the chase itself. Decoding Etruscan isn't like translating hieroglyphs with a Rosetta Stone or cracking linear B through statistical brute force. It's a game of shadows and intuition where every breakthrough, like realizing clan means son from tomb inscriptions, feels like catching a whisper in a hurricane. The Pyrgi Tablets gave us a handful of words. The Liber Linteus taunts us with its liturgical cadence, and the Piacenza Liver offers a celestial map without a key. Each artifact is a locked door, and humanity hates locked doors. We'll keep picking at them, turning the tumblers, because the alternative, walking away, is unthinkable. This isn't just academic obsession. It's the same impulse that fuels true crime podcasts and cold case documentaries. The Etruscans are history's ultimate cold case, and their language is the cryptic note left at the scene. Whether we're scholars, hobbyists, or casual viewers clicking on a YouTube documentary, we're all united by the thrill of the unsolved. And until that last, decisive clue slides into place, the Etruscans will keep haunting us not as ghosts, but as co-conspirators in the greatest mystery story ever told. The mystery of the Etruscan language isn't just a challenge for linguists, it's a rallying cry for collaboration across disciplines. Picture this: an archaeologist brushes dirt from a newly unearthed inscription, while a chemist analyzes the patina on the stone to date it. Nearby, a linguist compares the symbols to known Etruscan letter forms, and a computer scientist feeds the data into an AI model searching for grammatical patterns. This isn't a hypothetical scenario, it's how breakthroughs happen today. The Etruscan Texts Project, spanning universities from Rome to Los Angeles, embodies this teamwork, creating a shared digital database where every scratched word or faded fresco detail gets catalogued, compared, and crowdsourced. What makes these collaborations so powerful is how they bridge old and new worlds. Take the work at the University of Tübingen, where spectral imaging techniques, originally developed for medical scans, reveal vanished ink on pottery shards. A fragment dismissed as blank in the 1950s now glows with letters under infrared light, thanks to physicists working alongside classicists. Or consider the Eagle Project, a Europe-wide initiative using machine learning to cross-reference Etruscan inscriptions with Latin and Greek texts, spotting loanwords and name patterns invisible to the human eye. These partnerships turn isolated clues into constellations, revealing hidden connections across centuries. But collaboration isn't just about technology, it's about perspective. When anthropologists studied Etruscan dental remains from Volterra, they noticed something odd. Certain individuals buried with inscribed jewelry showed signs of childhood malnutrition. That discovery prompted linguists to re-examine grave markers for class distinctions, leading to the realization that words like Ziloth might have denoted not just political rank but inherited privilege. Meanwhile, art historians analyzing tomb frescoes noticed recurring gestures near inscriptions, suggesting that some symbols represented performative rituals, a detail pure textual analysis had missed. The challenges are as much cultural as technical. At Poggio Colla, an ongoing dig in Tuscany, American and Italian teams share excavation duties with local volunteers, blending academic rigor with community knowledge. A farmer's recollection of a childhood find in the 1960s recently led to the discovery of a sanctuary wall covered in dedicatory texts. These grassroots collaborations remind us that decoding the past isn't just for elites, it's a collective human endeavor. The stakes couldn't be higher, with climate change threatening fragile archaeological sites and looting erasing context forever. Time is running out to piece together the Etruscan puzzle. But the tools have never been better. From 3D modeling that reconstructs fragmented inscriptions to isotope analysis tracing the origins of inscribed lead tablets, modern science offers ways to hear the Etruscans more clearly than ever before. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson. No single discipline holds the key. Like the Rosetta Stone, which required the combined efforts of soldiers, scholars, and artists to unlock its secrets, Etruscan will yield only when we stop working in silos and start listening together. The future of Etruscan studies isn't just about digging deeper, it's about seeing differently. Imagine holding a shattered pottery shard with faded ink, and with a single scan, watching a 3D reconstruction algorithm reassemble the fragments virtually, aligning strokes of letters worn smooth by time. Projects like the Etruscan Digital Corpus are doing exactly that, employing photogrammetry to stitch together inscriptions scattered across museums worldwide. A piece in Berlin, a fragment in Florence digitally reunited for the first time in millennia. This isn't science fiction. It's the quiet revolution happening in labs where lasers and machine learning are becoming the new picks and brushes of archaeology. But the real game changer might be lurking in your pocket. Crowdsourcing platforms like Zooniverse now let armchair linguists tag Etruscan glyphs from high-resolution images, turning global volunteers into a distributed research team. When a retired teacher in Toronto noticed a repeating symbol cluster on a vase from Orvieto, it sparked a re-evaluation of trade route inscriptions. Suddenly, a single curious mind halfway across the world became part of the decipherment process. This democratization of discovery means the next Rosetta Stone moment might not come from a tenured professor, but from a pattern spotted by a graphic designer in Mumbai or a teenager in Buenos Aires. Yet technology alone won't crack the code. The most promising breakthroughs blend cutting-edge tools with ancient techniques. Take multispectral imaging, originally developed for satellite surveys, now revealing ghostly traces of ink on the famed Zagreb mummy wrappings. Where the naked eye sees only stains, hypersensitive cameras detect chemical residues of iron gall ink, pulling vanished words back from oblivion. Meanwhile, linguists are feeding neural networks with every known Etruscan word, all 1,200 of them, training AI to predict grammatical structures the way predictive text completes your texts. Early tests show these models can flag potential verb forms or noun cases, offering a digital compass in the syntactic wilderness. The horizon holds even wilder possibilities. Quantum computing could one day model millions of language permutations in seconds, testing hypothetical connections to Lemnian or Rhetoric that would take humans' lifetimes to explore. DNA analysis of skeletal remains from Etruscan tombs might trace migrations that explain linguistic oddities, linking vocabulary to ancestral homelands. And then there's the dream of every Etruscologist, the discovery of another bilingual text, perhaps buried beneath a Roman forum or hidden in a forgotten manuscript collection, waiting to snap the pieces into place. But here's the beautiful paradox. The closer we get to understanding Etruscan, the more we realize how much we've underestimated its complexity. Recent studies suggest regional dialects variations between northern Zilath and southern Zilch, hinting at a linguistic diversity as rich as modern Italy's. The Liber Lintius's poetic rhythms, once dismissed as repetitive, now appear to follow metrical patterns akin to Greek choral odes. Even failures yield insights. When AI mistook a funeral inscription for a love poem, it revealed how cultural bias shapes our assumptions about ancient voices. So will we ever fully understand Etruscan? Perhaps not in the way we've decoded Latin or Sumerian. This language resists easy categorization, its soul woven too deeply into rituals, art, and daily gestures lost to time. But the quest itself is the reward. Each generation brings fresh eyes, whether through algorithms, crowdsourced passion, or sheer stubborn curiosity, to a mystery that has outlasted empires. The Etruscans may never speak to us in complete sentences, but their fragments, like scattered stars, still guide us toward constellations of meaning. And in that endless pursuit, we don't just study history, we become part of its unspooling story.